Alright, as promised, we are going to go ahead and prove the quadratic formula. Now, we are going to do so using the standard form. Ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. And we do say that a cannot equal 0 because if a was 0, that means we would have no x squared term and it would just be a linear function. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a complicated process, especially if we are not used to working with manipulating formulas. Go through this video as slow as you need to. Go ahead and pause it whenever you need to jot things down. Make sure you rewind it and go back and follow through with anything that you may not understand. Use that question column on the side to jot down any questions that we can help you answer. Now, I am going to make some small notes along the side to help us keep track of what we're doing. I do want you guys to make sure you at least have the part that is already typed on the screen. The additional notes that I will make will be helpful, but I do want you to make sure that you have at least what is typed on the screen in your notes. And then once we get this done, you can go back and finish the rest of the other video on the quadratic formula. So the way we're going to go about proving the quadratic formula is by going through the process of completing the square. So the first thing that we always have to do when we're completing the square, and if you're a little bit confused on completing the square, you can go back to our videos on 3A9. That did focus on completing the square. But we want to make sure that our first term is 1. Our first coefficient is 1. So to do that, we divide everything by a. So this is really a divided by a is giving us the 1x squared here. Now we're going to divide the b by a, we're going to divide the c by a, and technically we're dividing the 0 by a because whatever we do to one side we have to do the other. So we would divide everything by a. But 0 divided by a is still going to give us 0. So that's why we don't put the over a there, because anything that we take 0 and divide by is going to give us 0. Now the next thing we would want to do is we want to get the constant over to the other side. So we would subtract the CA from both sides. We subtracted C over A and we subtracted C over A. And we end up with x squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a. The next thing we have to do is to complete the square. Now remember, to complete the square, and I will go ahead and scroll down a little bit for us on this so we can see it. Remember, you can rewind the video if you need to go back up and see an earlier step. But you'll notice we get we get x squared plus b over ax plus, and then you see this jumbled mess in parentheses on each side. So I just want to go over real quick how we got that. Remember, when we are completing the square, we take that term, that coefficient in front of the x, and we divide it by 2. So we are really doing b over a divided by 2, and then we have to square it. Now, we don't like fractions nested in fractions, so b over a over 2 is the same thing as b over a times 1 over 2, which would give us the b over 2a that you are seeing here. Remember, it has to be squared, and we have to add it to both sides. This is just going through the process of completing the square. The next thing we would do is factor. So since we now have a perfect square trinomial from completing the square, we would go ahead and factor, and we would get x plus b over 2a squared is equal to b squared over 4a squared minus c over a. Now the way I got this term right here is all I did was square this. I have to put that square with both pieces. So I had b squared, which is pretty simple, but I also had 2a squared, which 2 squared is 4, and a squared is a squared. So we've now factored this. So now we're going to have to do a little bit of manipulation. Now, I want to go ahead and see if I can combine this on this side over here. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down a little bit more. And what I need to do is I need to get a common denominator, and we're scrolling a little too far. I need to get a common denominator between these. So, what I am going to have to do to get a common denominator is I'm going to have to multiply the bottom by 4a and the top by 4a. And when I do that, I haven't changed the left side at all, but on the right side I'm going to have b squared over 4a squared still. But now I'm going to have minus 4ac divided by 4a squared, and you can see their denominators are now the same. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. Now that I have found a common denominator, I'm going to go ahead and subtract. So since these are the same denominators, I can just do the top b squared minus 4ac divided by 4a squared. Now, we're going to have to recall our skills from solving by taking the square root. We are going to need to take the square root of both sides of this equation. So remember, when we take the square root of something squared, they're going to cancel each other out. So we're just left with x plus b over 2a on the left. Now on the right, remember, when we take the square root, we have to take the plus and the minus. We have to take the positive square root and the negative square root. Alright, so I put the whole thing under the square root. B squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. And now I'm going to have to simplify a little bit. So I can take the square root and break it into the top and the bottom. So I'm going to put the square root on the top part and the square root on the bottom part, and that breaks that big square root into some pieces that are a little bit more manageable for us. So I'm going to scroll down again. Now, I'm going to leave the left side the same still. Now the top I can't really do anything about, but I can simplify 4a squared. 4 is going to break down into 2 times 2, and a squared is going to break down into a times a. So when I make my pairs, I'm going to have a pair of 2's and a pair of a's. So this is going to actually break down to be 2a. And you can see that is what we have here. We have x plus b over 2a equals the positive or negative square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now, we are wanting to solve for x, so we are going to want to subtract b over 2a. We are moving this to the other side, and we have to do that to both sides. Alright, so that's all we did there. Now, we have a common denominator, if you'll notice. We have a 2a and a 2a. So what we are finally going to do is we are going to go ahead and combine these. I just stuck that negative with the b, negative b. I still have the plus or minus because I don't know which I'm going to do, and I'm actually going to have to do both eventually. Alright, square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And now if you look at your formula sheet, you will see that this is the quadratic formula. So congratulations, you have now derived the quadratic formula. You may go ahead and return now to the notes on quadratic formulas. Thank you for taking the time and for watching this. Please make sure that you have this copied down into your notes, and you can go back and resume the last video from where you left off. Alright, thanks again.